and support them given their learning challenges and difficulties, diagnosed or undiagnosed. And I can't tell you how impressed I've been with instructors and them outwardly communicating via email if a student has struggled on an exam or has missed something. It is, all of you that are instructors, you should pat yourselves on the back, and because it's seriously impressive. And I am blown away because I've been doing this for 10 years or so, and the communication that's come from professors and TAs as well, professors especially in like entry-level math, freshman level math, I'm blown away. I know the sizes of those classes, and these instructors saying, hey, I noticed that your first exam didn't go so well. You do really great on your homework. I know that you can do it. I'm also blown away that the student is reading their email, so that's awesome. But I was just taken aback and really pleased about kind of the outreach that I've seen some instructors and departments do. So kudos to all y'all.
All right, and let's I made that the second thing here. Let's open that up to everybody. How do you all give students feedback? How do you reach out to the students who might have done less than they wish that they would on an exam or an assessment or an assignment? What are some strategies that people have? And I'm learning to shut up and not do all of the talking. So I'm giving you space to unmute and jump in. Excellent. And Karen added the how do I send messages to students from the gradebook from the community site of Canvas. This is a great example. You can have it very easily. Any student who scores less than a certain threshold, 75%, say they get an automatic. You can set it so that they get an automatic email. Now, the Canvas inbox also lets you send sort of these automatic emails. Well, not automatic, but you can send emails anonymously, and if you message them, if you write them carefully, it can sound like it is going to them alone, that you are watching and sending out a very carefully constructed, personalized message to them. Last week we heard one of our participants talk about sending using mail merge and sending emails with mail merge, and those can also come off as very specific, personalized emails to people. I'm sorry, that was in the Teach Online class, not last week at the Active Teaching Lab. Other thoughts?
I just wanted to add, this is Karen, that personal message really makes a difference, especially if you use their name. So even when I give feedback in the gradebook, I might be saying similar comments, but I add their first name to it and use that in the rubric as well, because their first name means so much to them that they feel that you're reaching out to them. But you could be saying the same thing to all of them, but just simply adding their first name in and then personalizing that message. And that just really means quite a bit. And I do use that gradebook thing quite a bit. And it does seem like it's coming to them personally when you do that. So people who haven't submitted something, I check in on them. And also if they don't sign into Canvas in the very beginning, I check in on them. So all of those mini check-ins are really important.
And if you think about the role of technology and how technology has changed, and especially as we've moved to the remote instruction and done more, employed more online techniques and more online content in our teaching, the tools are great. The tools, when I went through college, we didn't even have email. So having my instructor reach out to me, that was not a thing that was reasonable for me to think about or even to ask. As our students are coming up through the K-12, as I was saying, it's a very structured environment, right? They get nudges from their instructors. They get nudges automatically through the gradebook. They get nudges from their parents because the parents got nudged by their instructors. So they're used to getting sort of pushed and pulled around. Now, ultimately, we want to be able to develop independent learners, and we've had a lab on that. I should have added the link to that activity sheet on the bottom, but I think I forgot about that. But they're not necessarily all there at that point. And even if they are, they're not always there. So the nudges help them to move to that spot. And now it's more possible than it has ever been before with the Canvas inbox through that gradebook messaging feature. Even things like providing a side note in a forum, online forum that we have is a way to do that. All right. So if there's nothing else on that one, let's go back up to the top one. I see a lot happening here. This is fantastic. And the question is, when I held sessions meant to be hangouts, those sort of informal sessions, the get to know you sessions, I had to start about 90% of the conversations, I hear you, and ask questions. Students are super friendly, but they wouldn't take the risk of starting conversations. They would ask questions about the course, but not discuss life unless I asked. And that's reasonable, right? That's a big ask to ask the students to start to divulge about their lives. Not all the students are ready or willing to do that. So these sessions reverted to talking about academics. I felt stymied in my efforts to reach out and to help them through difficult times in their life. And that's absolutely reasonable and understandable. And if you think about the process of learning of you in any group, of us in any group, when we are faced with a stranger, unless it's like a cross-Atlantic conversation on an airline or something where you're never going to see them again, we're often hesitant to share or to overshare. We have to build up that trust building stage, and I think that is a process that also needs scaffolding. Dan Pell helped me out. Yep, go ahead, Adrian.
John, yeah, thank you for reading my question. And the answer I got, I don't know who typed that, but thank you, reminded me of how I could break the ice by asking about the animals students lived with. And that helped get one student to talk a little bit about their situation. You know, I was trying to have these hangout sessions because of the cross-campus calls for us instructors to, you know, touch base on our students' mental health or their condition, what's worrying them, what's happening at home, perhaps. And icebreaking was clearly important. I guess what I didn't mention, because I didn't think to type it, is that some of these students I was seeing repeatedly every 3 weeks. So I was getting to know them rather well, and it was still difficult to get conversations going. And I think part of it has to do with critical mass. There has to be a student who's extroverted and confident enough to follow up and do more than just answer my questions. And the critical mass was hard to build up in these sessions. You know, 3 or 4 students might not be enough.
Yeah, and thank you. You're absolutely right. That we often rely on those really extroverted students, right? A few labs ago, we had a lab on improving student participation. And this was really sort of an interesting one for me because it worked off of this article. I'm going to highlight it here. Oh, where is it? At the very bottom. Okay. Reconceptualizing participation as grading as skill building. The point of this article is that it's not just about being an extrovert or an introvert. Anybody can develop skills to be active participants in classes. And I love this lab because it talked about ways to scaffold that, starting off with the pair and share, right? If I just have to talk to one other student, okay, I can talk to one other student. That's not so scary. Now I just have to talk to a small group of students. Okay, not so scary, but I've done it. Chalk that on my belt or notch that or whatever. I've done it. I can build off of that and now talk to a larger group. Build off of that. I have some experience. I can now talk to an even larger group, maybe to the whole class, because your instinct at the very beginning there was that we need to have, where am I? We need to have those social spaces. We're missing those social spaces, and the campus administration has recognized that and did that campus call for more interaction. They recognize that meeting up with classmates in the hallway before class starts isn't happening in a remote instruction situation. So that informal, wow, what do you think about the test today? Or I didn't get the reading. Did you get the reading? I didn't understand this part or that part or the other part. That's not happening as much. We need to build that in because it's not naturally happening in the hallways because we're not in the hallways anymore. So I love that you're building that space. And I think that there are ways that we can sort of scaffold our way up to that so that our students get opportunities to practice participation, develop their participation skills, and it's a low stakes. There are low stakes structures. Structures was another part of that activity sheet. I'm going to put a link here in just a minute. That you can do so that there's no, oh my gosh, I don't know what to do, how to participate. Oh, there are very clear directions on how to participate in this activity or that activity or the next activity. Angela, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just thinking of another kind of idea or strategy that I've been using, because it is hard, especially if it's a larger group of students, to get people to kind of share personal stuff. So that, I think someone put in the worksheet, like using an icebreaker question can be something you do sort of at the beginning of a session. You know, I try to have something like silly and something kind of serious so they can pick. It's like an either or, pick which question you want to answer. But then another thing I do is I do have, like, the students have teams, and so each week I like rotate through the breakout rooms and check in with each team. And even though it's like kind of silly and awkward, especially the first couple times before we get into whatever we're going to talk about that week, I say, okay, we're going to do a quick go around, see how people are doing, and I'll say, call on them by name and say, how, student X, how's your day or week going, and kind of get that, even if they don't have anything, over the weeks it starts to get a little more, people are willing to share a little more. It takes time, I guess is what I'm getting at. And this last week, in one of the groups, one of the students, when it got to their turn, said it was their birthday that day, and the rest of the students in the group were like, oh my gosh, you didn't say it was your birthday. And so they all kind of started talking about that. So I don't know, sometimes they're not even taking that couple minutes. So putting yourself out there and then doing it regularly over time, I think, is where you start to build some of those connections.
Yeah, keeping the groups together. So you talked about the teams. They're able to sort of develop that trust in the teams. It's the storming, norming, performing thing. You can't perform until you've figured out what's happening, who to trust, who will say what, and then normalize that and become, okay, now we understand that. Go ahead, Dan.
Hi, John. Hi, all. Yeah, I was just going to add to all that. I will post the link to that Gillis article into today's sheet for you, so it's easy to find. It's a great article about encouraging participation in a different way. What I was going to add to this was something that came up during the Teaching Academy's winter retreat. We had some videos that were filmed by students talking about instructor practices that had helped them. And one of the things they brought up was how their instructor had put into the beginning of their class, like a simple check-in with multiple choice. How are you feeling today? And it could be emojis or it could be words, and that they were given a range of different answers, and they got to pick out of that, and then they were able to see, based on this big of everybody's responses, that there were a lot of other people feeling the same as them. And it was just kind of like, wow, I feel like I'm totally stressed out, or I feel like throwing up, or I feel like whatever. I'm not the only one. And I think that was a really simple way that you could help people feel like, okay, I'm part of, there's other people with me on this. I'm not alone in how I feel. And I think that one other thing that was added to that survey was, and if you want me to reach out to you, click this button, click here. And that way the student had a way of saying, maybe I need help, and I don't want to have to be the one to write to the teacher to ask for it, but like I can, if you click that, if you say yes to that, then the instructor is going to reach out and say, and you know, and find out what's going on. So I just wanted to share that.
Excellent, and thank you for mentioning the winter retreat here. I'm going to put that down, the link to that down on the bottom here as well. The participant guide for that. And in that participant guide are links to the videos that some of the students made. So that gets to our point of asking our students and seeing what it is that will work for them. But you have to do it because of the power dynamics are what they are in higher education. We have to do this sort of thing in a very careful manner with zero stakes for them, because again, it's a competitive field. The culture of higher education is that we have to compete, we have to be the best. Our students are enemies, show no weakness. So, and don't do anything that will get pushed back against you or held against you. So figure out anonymous ways to get that information, to get at what are their struggles and what are the things that are working. And that's kind of a neat thing, a way to look at it as well. Any other thoughts on that that first one before I move on? First set of questions and ideas. And there's that link. Thank you for Dan for sharing that. All right. Well, let's talk about graduate students. What do you do about graduate students who frequently hand in assignments late? Okay, and I'm presuming that the assumption here is that by this point in their career, they should have been encultured carefully enough or deeply enough that they should know what's happening and that these expectations, what the expectations are, and how to not screw up like that, right? All right. Any other thoughts besides what we have here? Okay. The question is this for in class or late for grads career milestones? All right. So things like my thesis is late, or is it my assignment is late? Good question. Is that supposed to be no idea or one idea? I'm hoping we have ideas.
I don't have specific thoughts on grad students in a course, but I have grad students who TA for me too, and I feel like that's another level where they may have things that they need to be doing. I think going back to that, acknowledging the struggle is really important. If anyone's been in any kind of graduate program, you have that personal experience of like, yeah, it can be awful. So I've definitely had conversations with grad students that are TAing for me where, you know, we try to build that relationship of getting to know each other and supporting each other, but then being able to share my own struggles in grad school and like, you know, validating that, yeah, you're getting ready for your prelim, everything is awful, and finding ways and strategies to help them with that. But that was just something to throw in there, thinking about normalizing struggle, or I don't like that term of normalizing it, but acknowledging that it's a real thing that we all have to deal with, for sure.
And I think in grad school, especially more than just the rest of higher education, there is this sort of idea that it's a gauntlet, right? And only our best students in grad school, especially, will go on to the tenure track, you know, high-paying tenure track is high-paying anymore, jobs that one can have. You know, they'll be the specialists in the field. Is that necessarily the case? Should it be the case? Are we closing the doors on our students that we should be supporting, opening doors, setting up these structures? One of the things that absolutely helped me through graduate school was writing groups, right? Meeting up with several of my colleagues and reading articles together, because I came from a literature program, and so I was reading for narratives, and I came here for a School of Education and theory, and you can't read theory articles or academic articles for the narrative. It's a different sort of thing than literature. So I had to relearn how to read based on that, and I didn't know how to do that. It absolutely required the other students sort of helping me figure that out by working with them. How to write a proposal, how to write a thesis, how to read for academic camps. So Camp A says this, Camp B says this. How do they overlap? All that stuff requires students helping each other, and it requires our mentorship as well to our students on how to do these things. And it takes that sort of the structuring and the scaffolding to do that. So are they late? Why are they late? What is the element that's late? I think that sitting down and having conversations, not with individual students, but with students in general, about what are the expectations? Are they ridiculous expectations? And even if they are ridiculous expectations, are they real? Can we navigate them? Can we change them, or do we have to figure out strategies to navigate them? These are things that we sort of have to figure out. And then what are the strategies? Because we probably struggled with that in grad school as well, if we were teaching graduate students. So think back to that. What were the problems for us? And maybe we didn't because, we got to the point and succeeded. But what did our colleagues in grad school who didn't get as far as we did, what were their issues and what were their struggles, and how could we have helped them along? How can we help our current students that way? Do other people have ideas on that? Thoughts, ways to support graduate students?
John?
Yeah, Vicki, go ahead.
This was my question.
Okay, great.
This is my first semester teaching, okay?
Congratulations. What a great semester to start, huh?
Okay, so I'm teaching library science and I'm teaching a management course. And so my feeling is that I'm trying to make it clear to students who are going to go out into the real world that you just can't hand in things late. It just doesn't work that way. I could not have handed, I was a director of a library. I could not have handed to my, provost stuff late. I mean, it just doesn't happen. And so, or if it does happen, it sure puts you in a bad light. And so I guess I'm just trying to bring that idea home that,
yeah,
and if they let me know ahead of time, I'm usually okay. But if they don't let me know ahead of time, to me, that's a bigger issue. So, because then, I don't know, maybe it's just me because I was management for so long, but the idea is you don't want to have to nudge employees. Okay. And I realize you're talking about nudging students too.
Right.
Okay. Which I agree. But, at some point you're saying, here's the expectation.
Yeah.
And I don't know. So, and it's harder in an asynchronous learning environment because you're so removed from your students. There's so little connection. So that's that's why I asked a question below is how does this apply when you don't see your students? You've asked them if they want to Zoom, they don't come back and say they do. You do email them and stuff like that. And occasionally I've called them on the phone, but overall, it's hard to build that kind of, trust that you're talking about and everything.
It is hard, and especially, I think that, and Karen, Skip, I want you to jump in here and expand my comments here. It's a different beast, teaching online and teaching in person. And one of the biggest challenges here, in my estimation at least, is exactly that the trust, the relationship building, the mentoring that sometimes happens somewhat naturally. And when you talked about in management, think about all of the employees that you had to get, they came in, they had issues, they had flaws, they had all that stuff, and you had to do a lot of work probably to help them understand what the expectations were and how to do all of those things. And our students are the same, even the graduate students, and sometimes especially the graduate students, because they came off of success in undergrad, right? And so they're feeling like, yeah, I got this, I got this. And now we enter into graduate school, and at least in my experience, graduate school was a totally different level of, I was very successful in undergrad. Graduate school, I really struggled to figure out how to make the strategies that worked in undergrad. They don't work in graduate school. I've got to relearn all of that. And figuring out what are the professional practices, how do I do all of that? That's a whole other culture that I needed a lot of handholding to get to the point.
Right, and the diversity of students in the course, you have different ages.
Yep.
I have 2 PhDs.
And different time zones, you said.
Yeah, I have 2 PhDs in my course.
Yeah.
Like, they could teach me, I think. But
well, in some areas they could, but in other areas they can't. And
right.
That's the beautiful thing about teaching and learning, right? All of our students come with great experiences in certain things, and if we can latch onto those experiences and use them as their foundation to build on the new experiences and the new areas of knowledge, then we've got it. Then the learning becomes theirs, and they can take the lead on that. And we're able to sort of back off and say, okay, I see I'm going to nudge you a little bit over here because you're going a little bit astray, but we don't have to like pull them and step them through it. Oh, Karen, I did not. You can jump in.
I don't really have a lot to add. I think what you said is true, but it is different online, definitely, than face to face. And congratulations on making it through this first semester, being brand new, Vicki. That's really tough. But really, it's the over communication.
3 weeks before I was hired, too.
Oh,
3 weeks after I was hired. So I had to do all the lectures while I was.
Oh my God. Oh my God. So really, online, it sounds like you're doing the right things. You're sending, you're communicating to them. You're reaching out to them by phone in different ways. The one thing you can do is have them, utilize more activities where they collaborate with each other. You don't have to be the sole person communicating with them in an online course. Get them to communicate with each other through discussion forums, through group projects, because you can't be the only person who builds community and creates communications. You have to come up with ways for the students to collaborate with each other and share with their knowledge with each other. So come up with collaborative activities, group activities, discussion forums, ways for them to communicate with each other, because you can't do it all and you shouldn't be doing it all. You want to get all of your students to communicate with each other, and I think that might help as well.
And let me just go back here and acknowledge that, yes, it's difficult to do what you're doing, and especially to start a course 3 weeks, with 3 weeks prep time to do that. So you will also know that next time is going to be easier, because the more times you do it, the easier it gets. And then, relying on the students and inviting them. And this requires giving up a little bit of control, which is scary, I think, for instructors across the board, regardless of the discipline. But think about how you learned yourself. You had to do it on your own. You were controlled in some ways, but in other ways, you sort of wish they got out of the way sometimes so that you could make mistakes and do things. Dan, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks, John. And thanks, Vicki, for sharing that. And Karen, I want to add in a kind of a counter perspective on what you're saying, Vicki, with getting students to hand things in on time. And I wish my wife was on today's lab, because this is an example that comes from her. But she's teaching in a fully online course of a language course, and she had some students that, or at least one student in particular, she was talking about, who essentially dropped out of the course about midway through, and she couldn't get responses, the work wasn't coming in, and so on. And she reached out, she tried different things, and eventually got through to that student who had gone through a mental health crisis. And she said, you're like 3 or 4 weeks behind, but can you come up with kind of a plan for how you're going to make up for some of the work that you missed? This is what you would really need to do to get back into the course. And that student went ahead and came up and like outlined, okay, I think I can do this by such and such, kind of set their own deadlines, and produced some of the best work of any student in that entire course, and is now back in, at least for the last few weeks, and on track to, to get through, maybe not as an A, but certainly to get through the course. And so, what I was going to suggest is that, I mean, what you say is true. In a working world, we can't just hand things in. We can't just ignore deadlines. But in education, we are one of many influences on students' lives. We are one of many instructors who have power to decide deadlines for students who don't talk to one another. And there's a lot of kind of arbitrariness in how instructors set deadlines. And I think what, after several decades of teaching, what I've come into to think myself is that the deadlines and the syllabus we set are kind of our best effort to say to a student, here is one approach and pattern that I anticipate will get you through this course. Like, these are the deadlines that I feel are going to help you to manage the workload and get to the end. But I also want to, I think I also want to be flexible to asking them, and do these work for you? And where would you, where can we make exceptions to this? Because ultimately the deadline in a course is the day that the grades are submitted to the registrar at the end of the semester, and everything up to there is really an open, opportunity to learn, and be measured in that learning so that you can get that grade and complete the work and the credit and complete the course. So I just want to, as a counterpoint, to say that flexibility in working with students to really find an approach that is going to work for them with all these different pressures in their lives is also a way of making sure that students can get through and learn and succeed.
And Adrian, I saw your hand was up. Did you have thoughts as well?
Thanks, John. Yeah, I'm actually typing it into the chat because I think it's going to be easier to convey there. So Go to the next person, please.
All right, very good. And anyone else have any thoughts on? Oh, Claire, yes, go ahead.
There we go. I was just thinking about grad students. I work with grad students a lot these days, and another thing to keep in mind is just for those of us in professional staff or academic roles, most of us earn a living wage, and this is our primary job and responsibility, at least for most folks I work with. And so many grad students that I know are balancing multiple jobs and responsibilities to make ends meet. And so while that's not an excuse, I'm not seeking to make excuses. I'm just seeking to highlight social determinants of health and well-being that are at play for graduate students in often unique ways. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's not just for graduate students, it's for every student. And it's even in some ways more of a struggle now because we don't know in remote instruction, we don't know what's happening in their lives as well because of that distance, because of all that. We don't know what's happening even in the classrooms, the learning spaces that we're in, because we don't know what's happening, in the rest of the house. Are there people screaming? If my camera's off, there can be chaos happening here. Am I on? I'm lucky to be on, right? Maybe. But is my internet good enough to support my video? Might not be, because my younger brother or sibling is in K-12 education remote right now as well, or my parents are having a fight, or there's some other sort of thing that's happening right now. There's a lot of, I'm hesitant to say this, but there's a lot of safety in the classroom. Safety is not the right word. There's a lot of control in the classroom, in a physical sort of sterile space with the desks and the temperature set at 67 degrees and the lights at a high level, and the Wi-Fi is all equally good for everybody. And we miss out on that in the remote instruction. All of our students are different, have different situations. So, other thoughts on that question before we move on to the next one? And I'd like to, again, invite folks to add any other things. It is now 1:55 or 1:54, so I know that some of you will have to leave, and that's fine. I want to point out at the very bottom of the page here, there are a lot of resources here. There are more resources than you should have to go through. Hopefully you will read through some of those things and say, oh, this one makes sense or that one makes sense. But some of them might not. again, usually what I do is I take specific practices that instructors can do, and I say, here are some easy things that you can do. Here are some more difficult things that you can do. And here are some real challenging things that if you were blessed to have the time and energy to do that, try those out. A lot of those are in our, we talked about it in past labs. So the activity sheets for past labs have a lot of that information. So I'm just putting those there instead of typing them out again for this lab. And there's the.
Sorry, it took me so long to write it that now I'm late as you're wrapping up, John. Maybe
Okay.
for next time.
All right. Add peer review to hold each other, to talk to each other. And that's great. Again, anytime the students can work with each other, they will learn from each other. They will teach each other. And that's good practice. Learning and teaching is both good learning practice. It raises the bar because the peers are watching. So they set the bar for each other. It's not you setting the bar. It's the peers setting the bar for that. That's great. It established bonds. It gives them a chance, something to structure a relationship over. And so that's another great thing. And then it structures are in a bind, but we don't have the time to do it. So yeah, there's a lot in there. Thank you, Adrian, for typing that out.
Thanks. Sorry it came so late.
And there it is right there. Great. Okay, how do we normalize having students help when the signs are beyond our comfort level? This is a great one for the last 2 minutes, right? Heidi, Claire, I see you in there. I invite you to unmute and jump in.
I'll just talk because I'm not typing fast enough.
Okay.
I was just going to caveat that everyone know that you can always reach out to mental health services or the Dean of Students office, as Heidi's putting in, for a consult, and would encourage folks to do that. There's also the student of concern form that Heidi's putting in. That's a great place when you're worried about a student. I think with this question too, like a warm handoff for a student can be really helpful and go a long way in having them actually get support. So being familiar with what MHS Mental Health Services at UHS offers can really, I've heard from student perspectives, like make or break whether a student feels comfortable checking out those services, not just individual counseling, but group counseling, a single session with a therapist, more informal things like Let's Talk, which isn't really therapy. So those are all resources available, I think. But I would also just add there's a survey coming out if you get it, if a colleague forwards it to you. It's a suicide prevention faculty staff training survey. So there was a suicide prevention training that exists and it's being updated. And so if you take that survey, you can help inform future training opportunities. And then by participating in that type of training at your leisure, it's a Canvas module-related course, you're able to kind of become equipped with some of this knowledge and skills that I can't possibly convey in a couple of minutes. But I think that would be the type of resource that faculty, staff, instructors, TAs really benefit from, and answers a lot of the questions that frequently come up about what resources exist. And then just normalizing, like talking about knowing the data, knowing how many students on this campus or in your course, or the type of student that you work with, if it's undergraduate or graduate or in a particular college or major, deal with mental health struggles, can help to normalize it too. You don't have to cite a specific quote, but there's lots of data in the Healthy Academics Toolkit to help familiarize yourself with the experiences of students. And then if you're able to convey that to students, that goes a long way as well, so that they know they're not alone and there are resources available.
I used to teach a class that I would always start off with sort of a help icebreaker, where the students would share something that they learned that was very successful or very helpful for them figuring out how to navigate the campus, and or an opportunity to ask for, does anyone know a resource on X, Y, or Z? And they were amazingly intimate, I guess, where students, they were very forthcoming about the struggles that they had, and forthcoming in talking about the strategies that they were employing or the resources that they had. And in some ways, having that conversation, continuing to ask the questions, what's going on? How can I support you? Where are these resources? It starts to, I guess, normalize humanity, and that we all struggle, and hopefully we all support each other to the extent that we can. We're at the last minute right now. I want to thank you all for coming and allow you to leave if you'd like. I'm going to stick around for the next couple of minutes. So if anyone has any follow-up questions that we didn't get to, I'm happy to stick around for as long as I need to. So, and then there's a lot of resources here throughout. Thank you all for jumping in and chatting with us today. And hope to see you next week. Bye-bye all. Does anyone have any fun plans for the afternoon? Anyone who's still on?